Welcome everyone to this morning's webinar. Today we are holding a cottage food listening session, and our webinar is being hosted by the Michigan Farmers Market Association. Just a couple of notes. Today's webinar is being recorded, and everyone who registered will receive a link to the webinar. We are also in a webinar format today and not a traditional Zoom meeting. So our attendees will be in listen mode, which means you will not be able to turn off your speakers and speak or turn on your microphone and speak. And you're also going to be off camera today. We have a couple of ways, though, that you can interact with us. The webinar chat is open, and we do see that folks are in there and utilizing that already this morning and introducing yourselves, so you are welcome to do that. You also have access today to the Q&A panel, question and answer period, or panel. So you are welcome to open the Q&A and you can type in your questions, and those questions will come to us as panelists. And we have the option to type in a response and then show the question and the answer, or we can indicate that we will answer the question live, and then we'll hold that question. You'll be able to see the question, and then we'll answer it verbally when we get to that point. So you are welcome to use the webinar chat and the Q&A panel for interacting with the panelists today. So we are going to go ahead and get started. And welcome, Diane. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Right, I'm gonna get back to. Great. So, as I mentioned, this morning's webinar is being hosted by the Michigan Farmers Market Association. We are a statewide member-based nonprofit. We support the viability of community-driven marketplaces so that they can connect all consumers to local farms and businesses. So we are really here to support marketplaces, and we know that community-driven marketplaces where farmers and producers are selling products directly to consumers is a great avenue for cottage food producers to market their products. So we're happy to be hosting today's webinar. And we are going to get started with introductions this morning, and I'm going to turn that over to my colleague Joe Lasowski for that.
Good morning, everyone. We're really excited today to have some great partners joining us for this webinar. I'm Joe Lasowski. I am the Food Access Director at MIFMA, joining Amanda in presenting. We also are joined by Violet from the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And then we also have Molly and Diane from the Product Center. You'll be introduced to both of the MSU Product Center. Whew, sorry about that. And you will be introduced to all of those individuals as we go throughout the presentation. So next up is our agenda. All right, as you see here, we are here today to talk about cottage food and the new law update that just happened. So you're going to get an overview and some bill language from Amanda and myself. Then we're going to invite Violet up to talk about updates from MDARD's perspective. And then this is also very much involving the MSU Product Center. So Molly and Diane will be able to share with us what they're doing and how they're making changes to their training and education for the new cottage food updates. And then we're going to end today with cottage food question and answers. And if there's a ton of time left over, or if there's some time left over, we may be able to open it up to some general food safety Q&A, but today's focus is really going to be cottage food. So for those of you who don't know, cottage food, or the cottage food law, was passed in Michigan back initially in 2010. And it's a law that allows producers a low barrier way to test products and their business concepts. The goal was to allow for the proven products and business models so they can progress into a licensed business model. So we know that licenses food licenses are a barrier for businesses, especially as they're just starting out. And so this was a way to help gain entry, prove their product, and grow their business and move into that licensed facility. As I said, it was passed in 2010, and it allows for the production of non-potentially hazardous foods to be made in a home kitchen, to be made in your home kitchen, not inspected by MDARD. All right. So we talk about that there's, some changes to the law. But first of all, let's hit hard at what is not changing. First of all, this law does not in any way change which foods are eligible or ineligible to be a cottage food to be qualified under that cottage food law. So that is not changing at all. This law does not change the packing, cooking, demonstration, and sampling requirements. And for the most part, it does not change the labeling requirements. Every product being sold still requires having a label attached to it. Um, there's one small update to that that we're excited about that will be rolling out, we believe, in the future. And we'll get to that in just a few minutes. All right, so just a reminder of what is eligible and not eligible within cottage food item or under the cottage food law. So what is eligible are the non-potentially hazardous foods. So these are foods that do not require temperature control, so they don't need to be kept in a refrigerator or freezer, or they don't need to be kept hot. So these are what can be, just at room temperature. It includes baked goods, cakes, pies, and cookies, breads, jams and jellies, dry herbs and herb mixtures, granola, and dry dip, baking, and soup mixes. So just a reminder, though, of anything that is not allowable under cottage food. So again, anything that requires that temperature control, meat and meat products, including fish, vegetable jams are a no-go. Canned fruits and vegetables, including salsa, no. Anything that has been pickled, that's also a no. This list is not everything. This is just the top list. So and we do have links from MDARD that does have a more extensive list if you're interested in your products. All right. I think I've got one more slide, Amanda. Perfect. All right. And then presenting cottage food items for sale. So just a reminder that cottage food items should be prepackaged and labeled prior to sale. So especially for those of you who are selling at farmers markets, you want to make sure that everything is done in the kitchen prior to going to the location that you're selling at. Um, these products cannot be used in cooking demonstrations, though they can be used as samples. You can provide samples, but it's preferred that the samples are prepared and packaged at your home. So, I know that's just kind of our general base information and reminder about cottage food. And with that, I get to pass it over to Amanda, and we will be able to hear about what is being impacted with the new law.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, so we are very excited that the cottage food law did pass a change in December of 2025, and we're excited to cover and share with you the language from that bill. And Joe's going to pop that link in the chat if you haven't had an opportunity to review the bill language. You can read it in full, and we're going to look at some excerpts today. So, three main changes to the cottage food law passed in December that we're going to cover today. One is a new voluntary registration system has been allowed to be created so that producers do not have to list their home address on labels, but can instead register and receive a unique identifier number that still allows traceability back to their business, but that number can be used instead of a license, or excuse me, instead of listing their home address on their labels. And we're going to go into that more. We are going to talk about how the bill increases gross annual sales cap for cottage food producers and ties that gross annual sales excuse me, to the consumer price index. And then we're also going to talk about the new provisions that allow producers to sell products online. So, welcome to 2026, cottage food producers. We're excited for that modernization. So, let's dive into these specific changes. So, as a reminder, Joe talked about the level or the importance of labeling, and that labeling requirement has not changed. Every product needs to be labeled prior to sale. So, you should be coming to a market with your product, your cottage food items already packaged and already labeled. And those labeling components have remained the same largely. The only one that has changed is that. Uh, Prior to December, everyone was required as a cottage food producer to list their name and address on every single cottage food product that they made. We know that that presented some issues around privacy and safety, and that there was an interest to not have your own home address on every product label. So the law allows for the MSU Product Center to create a voluntary registration system, and that registration system would then allow you to have a unique identifier number that you could put on your products instead of using your home address. We're going to hear from the MSU Product Center as to how creation of that voluntary registration system is going and what they expect to see out of that. But just a couple of notes directly from the bill language that this registration system will be voluntary. If you choose not to register in the system, you will still be required to have your name and address on your products. The only producers who will be allowed to not have their name and products will be those, or name and address on products, will be those that do register for the system. I also want to draw attention to the fact that the bill does allow for the MSU Product Center to charge a one-time registration fee of up to $50. So we know that creating and maintaining this registration system is going to have cost associated with it, costs that our land grant university in the state will need to recuperate. So the MSU Product Center does have the ability to charge a one-time registration fee as per the law. And we'll also maybe hear from MSU Product Center how they're coming with establishing this system and if there will be a payment associated and what that payment might be. But we want to flag that it is allowable for there to be a registration fee. Okay, let's dive into some of the more complex changes. Um, Changes to the gross annual sales cap. This is a big one that we did a lot of advocacy around. The gross annual sales cap was first established at $15,000 in 2010 when the law was passed and was raised to 25,000 in 2012. We know that a lot has changed since 2012 and that amount was very low, and was really hindering a cottage food business's ability to grow. And as Joe mentioned, with the original intent of the bill to eventually move into a licensed format. We know that gross annual sales cap was very limiting. So now we've seen an increase into that gross annual sales cap. So directly from the bill, the language says that the gross annual sales cap will be computed on the basis of the amount of gross sales on a per person basis within or at a particular domestic residence. So we used to have a gross annual sales cap that was by household. Now we are applying a gross annual sales cap per person on a per person basis. Um, and we also now have two different levels of sales caps. So if the cottage food operation sells a cottage food product at a price of $250 or more per unit, then they have a gross annual sales cap of $75,000 annually. And in our advocacy process, we learned that this is primarily for wedding cake producers. So the department and the legislature was hearing from folks who are making very sophisticated high-end wedding cakes. They have a large per unit price tag, and so that meant that they were getting to that gross annual sales cap much faster than a cottage food producer who's making a product with a much lower per unit price and has to sell a lot more units to get to that gross annual sales cap. So, if you are a wedding cake producer that's selling products of $250 of value or more per unit, your annual gross annual sales cap will be 75,000. For everyone else, the gross annual sales cap has increased to $50,000 annually, again per person. Um, And I also want to flag that in the bill, it specifically says the department may request in writing documentation to verify the annual gross sales figure. So record keeping is important in any business, and that also applies to cottage food. And then I want to flag too that a new provision in the law ties the gross annual sales tax or scales limit to the consumer price index. So what does that mean? It means that the gross annual sales tax or sales, why do I keep saying tax? Gross annual sales threshold can change over time without us having to go back and pass another bill. So, on an annual basis, every year on October 1st, the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development will have the ability to adjust the gross annual sales amount based on the consumer price index. So the consumer price index changes every year with as an adjustment for inflation and other economic forces. And so as the essentially as the value of a dollar changes, the consumer price index can be applied to change the amount of the gross annual sales threshold. So, on a 3 year, based on a 3 year average of the consumer price index, the department can opt into changing or modifying the gross annual sales cap every October at the start of a new fiscal year. And this gross annual sale or the consumer price index that we're monitoring for these changes would be the Detroit Consumer Price Index. So that's great news. That means that over time, as economic forces change the value of a dollar, this sales threshold can keep up without additional changes to the law being required through the legislative process. All right, so that's a little bit about the changes to the gross annual sales cap. Let's go on now to the third and final area of changes, which is the ability for cottage food producers to sell online. I know there's a lot of text on this screen. We're going to go over it, and then we're going to see a couple of definitions to further illustrate this point. This is copy and pasted right from the bill. So we're going to go through this line by line. Except as otherwise provided in this subsection, a cottage food product must be sold directly from the cottage food operation to the consumer. This is not new. We know that since the bill was passed, direct producer to consumer sales has been the pathway for cottage food. So now we're saying that's still the baseline, still expectation that cottage food is primarily sold from producer to consumer in that direct face-to-face interaction. However, there are now some exceptions to that. We still are not allowing sales by consignment or at wholesale. That is still clearly prohibited. So we still do not have folks buying food from a cottage food producer and then turning around and reselling it. We still have the transaction directly from cottage food producer to end consumer. So we're still not utilizing consignment or wholesale for cottage food products. However, we are now allowing that a cottage food product may be sold by internet or mail order or may be delivered to a consumer through a third-party delivery platform. And we're going to get a definition for third-party delivery platform. If these conditions are met, the first condition is that the cottage food operator must provide an opportunity for a consumer to directly interact with the cottage food operation before they buy the product, and that the cottage food products sold by the internet or mail order or delivered through a third-party delivery platform must be sold and delivered only to a consumer in this state being Michigan. So, we're going to get a definition for third party platform. We're also going to get a definition for a direct interaction. Um, but now cottage food items can be sold online, can be delivered by a third party delivery platform if there's an opportunity for the consumer to interact with that producer before the sale, and if the food is sold only within the state of Michigan. I also want to mention that an opportunity is not a requirement for the customer. So we need to present the opportunity for the consumer to interact with us directly as cottage food producers, but we do not have to require it. We just need to make that opportunity known. And if you're having trouble reading the yellow language, again, Joe had that link in the chat box to the bill language. You can read the full bill language in black and white there. So let's move forward and dive into some of these definitions. Thanks, Haley. All right, definitions. What does directly interact with mean? It means that it includes either a face-to-face meeting or a virtual meeting. So we need to be able to see and hear each, or permit two-way communication so that participants can see or be seen and hear or be heard by all parties. So what we're doing here today, this Zoom format, I can see Joe, I can hear Joe. If Joe is selling me a cottage food good, I can interact with him face to face or virtually, and we can have two-way communication. This could possibly work to meet these definitions for directly interact with in a virtual meeting. I could also have a phone conversation. I could do a FaceTime. There's possibly other ways, other methods that we could connect for a direct interaction or virtual meeting before the cottage food purchase. Again, we just want consumers to be informed about who they're buying cottage food products from and to be able to make a a reasonable assurance that they're confident in buying the cottage food product from the cottage food producer. So the last definition I want to share related to this online sales method is what we mean by a third-party food delivery platform. And I know there's already been a lot of questions around this. So here's the definition again, directly from the bill language. A third-party food delivery platform is a business engaged in the service of delivery from a cottage food operation or online food ordering and delivery from a food service establishment to a consumer. So I've highlighted delivery here. This third-party food delivery platform is not the food producer. The cottage food producer is still the producer of the product. They are producing it, packaging it, labeling it. And this third-party food delivery platform is simply taking it from the food producer to the consumer. They are doing the delivery of the product. They are not doing the sale of the product. They're not doing the production of the product. They're doing the delivery of the product. So what might be an example here? A DoorDash would be an example that many folks are familiar with. There may be others. All right, so those are the three main changes that we wanted to highlight that came directly out of the bill language. The voluntary registration system that we're going to learn more about from MSU Product Center, the changes to the gross annual sales cap, and the ability for cottage food producers to now sell online. We want to highlight that MIFMA has a number of different cottage food resources, and I'll let Joe talk about those more and how we're going to be updating those to reflect these new changes in the law.
Yeah, so we've got a number of great resources on our website. I think Haley is going to help me post links into our chat with all of these. I think we've got them. If not, we'll get them on our website and make sure they're in any follow-up emails. First, we have our cottage food basics for farmers market vendors. So this is a great resource on how to like prepare your cottage food items for sale at the farmers market and what steps you need to make sure you're going through. Um, then we have a training webinar similar to this, going through just the basics of how to check cottage food labels. Making sure one of the things at farmers markets that we try and train our market managers to do is checking the labels of all of the businesses that have labeling requirements. And so this one is specifically for those who are selling under cottage food, just to make sure that everything is matching the expectations of the state and the law. And then finally, we have our labeling guide um, that, again, kind of breaks down exactly what that label should look like and is perfect for any cottage food business to make sure that they are following the law as it is written and the expectations of MDARD. These resources have not yet been updated to contain everything from the new law. And they will be, they're in line to get those updates as soon as we get some additional confirmation from MDARD as things are moving forward. So be on the lookout for those updates and any other resources that may be created due to this exciting change. And then with that, oh yeah, one other big piece of legislation that came through at the same time and is connected. For those of you, especially our market managers out there that are interested, is what we've been calling the honey and maple syrup parity bill. So, honey and maple syrup have their own um, sales threshold exemptions from licensing, and it is not cottage food, but it is in that similar vein. And Senate Bill 93, which has also passed the Senate, the House, and been signed into law, um, it increases the sales threshold um, for honey and maple syrup producers and ties it to the threshold for cottage food law. So all three items now will have the same threshold. So producers with gross sales more than $50,000 need to be licensed by MDARD. Um, Not combined. Each of those will be individual. Violet will correct me if the honey and maple syrup, I believe those are still individual. Um, and so yeah, honey and maple syrup producers with a gross sales of 50,000 or less are exempt from licensure, similar to cottage food, but it is a slightly different law. Again, they do have labeling requirements that must be followed, but they can be sold wholesale, but the real retailer must be a licensed food establishment. So if you know any farmers or any producers that are doing strictly honey and maple syrup, this is a law that changed that could impact them. And with that, I think I am very excited to introduce Violet to share from MDARD's perspective about this change. And Violet, I forgot to double check and see if you had any slides that you wanted to share.
Well, good morning. So I didn't. I saw there was 15 minutes and I was like, I knew you guys were going to have information together. So I was just kind of basing some of the things like that I was going to talk about. And then I also have Jennifer Bonsky on with me as well. So I may deflect a couple items to her as well. But so as far as MDARD goes, we as food inspectors, we get out and we see the farmers markets once every 60 months. So, as I believe we have a lot of market managers on this session, right? So, if you haven't been seen, you might be getting seen, but also understand that if there is a complaint that we receive on the farmers market, we will reach out to you. We will come visit the farmers market to investigate the allegations of the complaint as well. So, any of the farmers markets that are listed on that MIFMA website, which would be the folks that are on this call, this information session. We are required as inspectors, area inspectors, to go see them once every 60 months per our policy. So expect to see us out and about. Now, when it comes to actually going to the market and doing our inspection, we will come find the market manager. We'll come introduce ourselves, um, and we'll talk with you guys regarding what our plan for the day is going to be. That we're going to walk around, we're going to inspect booths. That's going to include, if your market has licensed facilities, we're going to look at those booths. We are going to take a look at cottage food vendors, but ultimately they are operating and they're exempt from the food law. So therefore, we're going to do an overview and make sure those labels are all inclusive for statement of identities, net weights, ingredients. And then also, like, we want to see those allergen statements on there if it's an allergen product. And then I know that we're really excited about this registry that MSU is putting together, but at this time, we still have to see the addresses on the labels. So until that becomes firm and in place, people are still going to have to have their address on their label to be compliant. Um, I know there was a couple questions regarding samples at the market, and our friends at MSU Extension, they really encourage our cottage food vendors to pre-package all their samples, and I think that's an excellent practice. However, there are best practice guidelines on the MDARD FAQ, the frequently asked questions page, that will allow for sampling best practices. So you'll have to take a look at those guidelines, meaning that the product can't be temperature controlled for safety once it's opened. You have to have hand washing. You have to have a clean way to do these samples as well. So um, I think that covers the sampling thing, covers the labeling thing. Um, what else are we going to be looking at? We are not going to be asking vendors for their income, most likely. Unless there's like a very strange scenario where you can definitely see somebody has a commercial kitchen and we've received complaints and we have to do something with a cottage food vendor, we are likely not going to ask them what their income is on their like for their annual sales. So we know that threshold went up, which added some more freedom. But we just do not have staff to go through and audit these people and their finances and stuff to see what their income is. And honestly, there is a threshold in someone's personal kitchen of what they can actually do. Um, it's I know there was a lot of questions regarding, individual. Okay, well, 50,000 per individual. It's like, what is the capacity of your personal kitchen? Is it reasonable to think every person in your household could have a $50,000 business in your home kitchen? Like, just think it through,
Probably.
I guess is what I'm saying. It's perhaps not reasonable. And Jennifer, can you add to that, please, at all?
Yeah, I
Or
would say Violet nailed it in that the kitchens have a capacity limit. That's why the limit is only 50 or 75,000 if it's a higher priced item, because the wedding cakes don't take as much space as like cupcakes or cookies would all over the place. The intention with cottage food is like primary resident with a business. And so if your business has like 4 people, 5 people contributing to the 50,000, I don't think the intention of the law is to say, well, then that would be 50,000 times 5 people in my family, and I could do up to a 250,000 in my house, if that math is right. I will dig into the law language a little bit more, and we'll definitely make sure we put some language on our FAQs, because I hadn't heard that question come up like that. But to operate safely within the capacities of your kitchen should be one of your main goals.
yeah. Yep. And ultimately, like the law is intended for your home kitchen. It's not for you to build out in your garage another kitchen where people would likely be growing into that business. So, yeah, that said, I'm going to leave it at that until we have more and the Department of Agriculture is fixing our website and updating it right now. We have a group working on that right now. So, see change. You will see changes on there with these frequently asked questions and breaking out products that are frequently asked questions regarding specific products. Gosh, well, there was one other one
Violet, can
here.
I hop in for a second? Joe mentioned
Please.
honey and maple syrup. Those
Oh
are
yeah.
both separate totals. So it's not a combined total if a person does happen to have both businesses. The maximum allowables line up exactly the same as cottage food. So they have that 75,000 as well if they have the higher ticket items, which could be very possible in the world of maple syrup and honey. The only thing that doesn't automatically sync up is the registration with MSU. That is very particular to cottage food. So if there are maple syrup and honey people on here, you won't have that option. So just wanted to flag that since the question came up.
Well, and additionally, you may see these vendors that have honey and maple syrup, but also have cottage foods. And now we're looking at two different things, right? We're not looking at like, oh man, these guys are really bopping and they have a big honey business, but they also have cottage foods. They definitely need a license. Well, they may not because if their honey falls under one area and then say they're putting that honey, they're flavoring it, right? They're infusing it with a safe infusion or like the honey sticks or whatever. Now they're selling a cottage food, so it also needs to bear that those disclaimers were, and again, I forgot to mention on the labeling, we do care about that disclaimer that they have that they're letting the general public know that this is made in a home kitchen, not inspected by the Department of Agriculture. And that also goes for the honey and maple syrup folks as well. So um, don't get too don't get too confused on like honey and maple syrup. They're individual honey, maple syrup. They're over this exemption. They're not a cottage food. Their money lines up with cottage food of what they're allowed to sell. And they may use honey and maple syrup in a cottage food. So don't get too confused, but I know it's kind of a web. Um, so Jennifer, what else am I missing? I'm trying to think about what other things we may see when we're out and about. I know that one thing that did pop up when Joe was reading the list of approved things regarding like dry soup mixes, baked mixes, that type of thing. Um, Keep in mind that if someone is thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to do samples now of that product. If they want to bake a cookie that they're selling a cookie mix, that's fine. But if they're going to try and do a dip that has like cream cheese and sour cream, that is not going to be allowable as a sample. So, I guess as a market manager, just keep your eyes open for that as well, and that they're not allowed to do. We say TCS, temperature controlled for safety. Well, that means refrigerated or frozen. That's what that means. So I know that sometimes we get a little caught in our jargon as inspectors and as people who are experts or in this area. So no refrigerated, no frozen as cottage foods. So. What else,
There's
Joe? You got
a
anything
type
else
of
you want us to
exemption.
address?
There's another type of exemption in the food law, and that is for the nonprofits doing things like bake sales. So that is exempted separately from cottage food. So it is different, and they don't have to do the same home address and labels. But again, they should be separate because a nonprofit cannot be cottage food because it's not a person associated with a residence, a home kitchen. So you would have your bake sale for the nonprofit is one thing, your cottage food is one thing, your honey and maple syrup is another thing. There's different avenues which allow for exemptions under the food law.
Oh, and I see that there's a comment in the chat, and thank you. So refrigerated, frozen, hot held are temperature controlled, right? Like, so no hot held samples either. That's not an approved sample for cottage food either. Or like beverages, people that make coffee, they roast coffee beans. They can sell coffee beans, they can sell ground coffee, but they cannot sell cups of coffee. They can't do prepared beverages. They can sell a lemonade mix, but they cannot make lemonade and sell it. They can sell tea bags, dried tea and herbs, but they cannot prepare it and sell it hot. So,
Right.
okay.
No, thank you for that. Appreciate that clarification. So I really do appreciate Violet and Jennifer being here to help answer questions, and we look forward to seeing what comes from the department as far as clarification and resources around these changes. MIFMA will be sure to share them, and I'm sure others will too. I do see that there's some general food safety questions or food licensing questions in the Q&A, and so if you are able to stay on, Violet and Jennifer, and answer any of those by typing, that'd be great. Um, and just to clarify, Ben, no beverage qualifies for cottage food. Beverages are not cottage food, whether it's tea, coffee, fire cider. Um, nope, 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 no beverages. Okay. So we are going to move forward. Violet and Jennifer, if you're able to stay on for Q&A or type in the chat, fantastic. But we are going to keep moving along and let Joe. Oops, sorry. I went too far. I want to go back one. We don't want to skip. No, I'm on the right one. Sorry. Joe, introduce our next speakers.
Yeah, I'm really excited to bring our partners at the MSU Product Center, Molly and Diane. The MSU Product Center has done a great job over the years providing trainings and just resources and education around the current cottage food law. And they're going to have, hopefully in the near future, a bigger step in the labeling process. And so I would just encourage them to join us now. And thank you for being here with us today.
All right, thank you so much. Molly was double booked today, so you have just me, but hopefully I can provide what you need today. So the MSU Product Center will host a webinar on May 21 at 7 o'clock in the evening to launch the new cottage food business voluntary registration. So we will post the registration link for the webinar on our MSU Product Center website, as well as with our partners to market the webinar as well. So I expect MDARD will also have something on their website directing to it. So our partners in conducting the webinar are the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, as well as our colleagues at MSU and the Health and Nutrition Institute, who lead the Cottage Food Law monthly webinars. The goal of the 21st webinar will be to provide a review of the new cottage food law changes as you've done here, an overview of the new cottage food voluntary business registration, and introduce you to MSU Extension hosted webinars on cottage food and more, and then to host a Q&A at the end, just as you're doing here. So the registration program will charge a one-time $50 registration fee for this registration, and then it will collect the following information. So the name of the business, if you have one, the name of the business owner, the home address, the phone number, the email, and then a website URL if you have one. And we have talked with representatives of MDARD and have identified two conditions that will require a new registration and fee to be paid. One, if a business who registered has a change in lead contact, or if the business's home address has changed. So this information that we collect in the registration is exempt under the Freedom of Information Act, so you don't have to worry about that. And we will provide a registration report to MDARD upon request. So the registration link for the new cottage food business voluntary registration will be on the MSU Product Center's website and available on May 21st when we have that webinar. So that's all I had for you today, Joe. Hopefully that will help people know when the hard launch of the registration starts.
That was fantastic, Diane. I'm excited to hear that the registration is going to launch sooner than I was anticipating. For those who are interested in that, is the best place to sign up directly on the MSU Product Center website.
Right, so the registration for the webinar, we'll have that on our website. And then when the link is ready for the actual registration, the voluntary registration, that will affect what they put on their label, that will also be on the MSU Product Center's website, yes.
Fantastic. And we did have one question in the Q&A that popped up. As a market manager, Is there going to be a way for us as market managers to check and confirm that someone is on, like, has their registry already with you and is not just faking us with a couple of numbers?
Jennifer, did you hear that question? Joe, would you say that question one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. So will the market managers or general public be able to confirm registration on that cottage food list?
Seems like
I
the
don't
only,
think that the
Jennifer,
general public will have a way, but MDARD would. So if we found a number that what we wanted to double check on, we have the right by law to ask MSU for the database information behind it.
yeah, they're the only ones that, as I understand it, that would be able to ask us for a list.
It
So
does
it sounds
also
like
say on MSU's website that the information is exempt from FOIA that's in the database. So it would just be us. And that's why we're not housing the database information because we have a responsibility to be transparent and share information.
so
So you're,
Jennifer, so with Joe's question, would an MDARD or a market manager be able to go to MDARD and say, hey, could you give me a list? Could you identify whether a person's registered or not?
probably not. We have not identified a policy as far as that goes. But the market manager could say, show me something that says you were registered. You should have gotten a confirmation email from MSU or a text. The farmers market can do things like that and request or require in order to participate at the market to where, again, we have to comply with law. And so I'd have to dig into the exact language, but I don't think it's our intention to ask MSU for that list every time and then share that list every time.
That would be a great way for a business to prove their registration because they will have that once they register.
Great. Thank you. I love having that clarification. Um, we do have a couple of other questions in the Q&A. Amanda, have you gone through them and like, is there any that you specifically would think are good for the greater group before I just start randomly picking?
No, we have just some general food licensing questions that I think we can hold. We can try to take the cottage food ones first. I do also just want to again reiterate the caveat that MDARD is still working on putting out written materials and that these questions are definitely helpful for both MDARD and MSU Product Center to hear what questions are out there. But I just also want to reiterate that we might not have all the answers today. So if we have any outstanding questions that don't get a direct answer today, we will certainly follow up, and those answers will be incorporated into written materials as they come out from the department, from MSU Product Center, from MIFMA, from MSU Extension, and beyond. So also just want to remind folks as we go into this Q&A period that we designed this as a listening session because we don't have all the answers yet. So we're definitely taking in all the questions, and if we can't answer them today, we'll answer them and follow up. Um, but Joe, if you want to pick out of the cottage food questions first, um, we can start with those.
Okay, here we go. I have a question specifically about the delivery. We have a CSA farmer that's in the mix today, so yay, we love our CSA farmers. And they are looking next year to add more products to their CSA box and they're looking to add delivery. So if they as the farmer and the cottage food creator are delivering the food, is that allowable?
That sounds to me like it would be allowable. Mhm.
Perfect. Oh, we also did just see coming through the chat, can we ship via UPS, FedEx?
So yes, so the intention in the law is for the cottage food producer to get the product directly to the consumer. It could be through delivery system, as Amanda mentioned. So it could be Uber Eats or anything like that. It could be USPS, it could be UPS. The intention is it's not going to be a retail facility where you can park it outside and someone can come pick it up later. That's not delivery to the consumer. It's not going to be we've just gotten lots of questions where can I store cottage foods at my store for people to buy? That's not delivery. If it's an online hub where a cottage food producer can like register and have a spot online where the consumer can go purchase directly, they're offered that opportunity for the interaction, and then the cottage food producer ships it directly, that would be allowable. But that same sort of setup at the store, brick and mortar, isn't quite in line with the law.
Diane, would it be possible for you to throw the MSU Product Center website link into the chat just so folks know how to access that webinar information when it comes open and all the other great resources that you have?
Sure, I'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Jessica did just put in the chat that it looks like SB 93 is not the maple syrup producer. I'll have to go back and double check that, Jessica, and we'll make sure that if there's, we'll
So the
find that
best spot
language.
to go for all those references is the whole Michigan food law. So the part that's on the cottage food website with the link is just the segment that was updated in 2025 December. So if you Google, and I think I put the link in the chat, hopefully I did it right this time. But you could go look at that. You could see the cottage food definitions and exemptions. You could see the maple syrup and the honey exemptions and definitions. And then the nonprofits are in there too. When you look at the definition of what a food establishment is, there's a line in there that says the following are not food establishments, therefore do not need licensing. And that's where it talks about your nonprofit for bakery type things. So it's in the main food law. All these things are housed in the food law. When they're introduced as bills, they're smaller little segments and they have different numbers, but they're all in Act 92 of the food law.
And then we did have a question of when do these changes go into effect? And
They're here today.
they are here. They popped up a few weeks ago officially. Um,
I
so
believe it was March 24th
Yep.
was the first day of going into effect.
yeah. I
Although
remember getting that email and feeling like it was much longer ago than the 2 weeks that it's been. But
Mhm.
Although
yeah,
obviously the registration program hasn't quite launched yet. So
right.
everything else is in place.
That's
Yep.
just because of the anticipation for so long.
When I really do appreciate MSU working on this to make sure that it's done right, to protect your data, to make sure that it's a solid system that then we can pull data from as well, should there be a foodborne illness or something along those lines. So it takes time, especially for a government or educational establishment to build tech stuff. As Amanda mentioned earlier, welcome to 2026, right? We're probably still in 2020 over here.
Yep. All right. We've got a few more minutes yet. I'm going to dig into this next one. Do fruit syrups like elderberry fall under the honey, maple syrup, or jam, or is it considered a beverage?
So they are not a cottage food. They're not on the approved list. They are also not under honey or jam or beverages or anything. They require a food license to be produced at this time,
Great. Thank you.
We do
especially elderberry syrup.
Yeah.
Because it could either be sold as a food or a dietary supplement. But regardless, elderberry syrup needs to be made under licensure.
Great. Thank you. So random question just for me. I had someone last year ask about birch syrup. Does that fall under maple syrup? I mean, because I don't think it's maple syrup law. It's just it says syrup law.
Maple syrup has a very specific definition in the federal code, the federal regulation, and it is maple syrup, and it's got nothing in it except those processing agents. I think that's the way they say it. That's why you can't like add the spicy, whatever people want to add, make like hot maple syrup or something like that, because then by definition it's not maple syrup anymore. Then it would be, as Violet said, cottage food now. So birch syrup is different than maple syrup, and Violet, you got to answer for that one. I'm a Detroiter.
So, as far as I know, any syrup besides maple syrup would have to have some kind of process review and be licensed to be manufactured like that. Um, we've actually made that on a personal level, and it's great stuff, but the process itself is not the same as maple syrup. it's a very long, drawn out process. So I'm going to lean to the fact that it's not a cottage food. It's
Yeah.
not maple syrup, right, by law, as Jen just stated. So it will need to be a licensed product.
Awesome.
And I believe I've heard in the past, like it's not conducive for the kitchen. People set out shacks,
It,
right, for maple syrup. And so I
yeah,
don't know if they're doing the
yeah,
same thing with birch syrup, but that's where, again, cottage food is very specific to in your kitchen, not in an off building, not in your garage, not anywhere else. So I think that comes into play there too,
right. And
regardless.
it's not a conducive product to make in your kitchen. It's not.
So yeah, no cottage food then.
Yeah.
Love it when I get to learn more too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Um, we do have, I'm gonna throw to one final cottage food question, and then Amanda, I think that should give us time to wrap up. Um, we've got a farmer here that has an online store. Um, can they sell through that online store cottage food products that are produced by someone else, as long as it provides a method for the customer to contact the producer directly and the producer delivers the items directly to the customer? So they're just the payment system?
Um, from what I'm reading, it looks like it would be okay. It has to be a spot where, again, I am the cottage food processor. I am dealing directly with the consumer. I am shipping it directly to the consumer. So if there's a spot in between just to allow a bunch of cottage food people to get together and have like a landing page, that would be allowable. But if the farmer's taking possession of the food ahead of time, making stocking or storing it, or involved in the shipping, that would not be allowable.
It sounds very wholesale when that happens.
Yes, yes.
Um,
Yeah.
there is a question here though that I can answer like really quick. Joe, this farmer, if a farmer is producing a food item that is done in a licensed kitchen, does the farmer need to be licensed to sell that food product? It If you're producing a product in a licensed kitchen, you should hold a license
So it
in
says
that licensed
purchasing. I
kitchen.
was going to ask about that. So if you go to a restaurant and buy takeout food and you're looking to sell it at the farmer's market,
No.
no.
No, if a farmer is purchasing a food item that's made in a licensed kitchen, so let's say the farmer buys um
I've got a
flavored
good example. I've got a
syrup.
good
Okay,
example.
good.
So, okay, so say you're a produce farmer and you sell cherries and it's cherry season, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna go to Cherry Capital and I'm gonna buy 2 cases of dried cherries and I'm gonna sell them on my table next to my fresh cherries. And you're doing it just so you can make a couple bucks. There is and like in our law, there's an exemption for incidental sales. So if less than 5% of their products sold are like those things they're getting, they don't technically need a retail license to do that. So if
You
it's
are,
minimal things on your table.
mhm. You are not supposed to
But
mix though cottage foods and commercially prepared foods in display or in a booth or a vending spot. So they would have to be completely separate. And then
yes,
they would still have to be labeled and stuff like that, from the commercial kitchen. Yeah, kitchen made
sure.
me think of restaurant. I'm sorry.
I know I read it and I was like, oh, I have this answer because I had the cherry example in my head and then I read it and I was like, so, but no, so there is incidental like exemption. And we see it all the time up in Traverse City, like all the time, where they run and they get boxes of stuff and then they sell just a few packages of stuff with all their produce. And it's like, okay,
Right.
you know, it's coming from a
Potentially
licensed source. It's,
hazardous is also the way to
yeah.
go for that. So chips,
Yep.
pop, candy
Yep.
bars, feel free. That stuff won't require license.
Right.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of our speakers today. We do still have a couple of questions in the chat. We will do our best to either follow up in the chat Q&A or afterwards in the follow-up email. I want to thank Violet, Jennifer, and Diane for joining Amanda and myself today. This event would not have been possible without you. Amanda, anything else that we should end with?
No, thank you for your attention today. And as a reminder, we'll be sending out the recording, and we can include slides as well, for anyone that registered today. And please be on the lookout for more resources to come from MDARD, from MSU Extension, and MSU Product Center and from the Michigan Farmers Market Association. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. There's a lot of really good questions on here that didn't get answered either. So just as a inspector, like it's our job to help market managers. So I really do encourage you guys to reach out and know your area inspector and have that relationship. I really do. I love my market managers. I love helping them. So there's so many good questions on here.
And as a former market manager, I will say having a good relationship with your inspector, it's so much easier to catch something early than to have your inspector show up and start throwing out products because it is not potentially hazardous, but it is actually hazardous. Which I've been there and it's not a good feeling. Meat products do not believe or belong in baked goods and then just sitting on a counter. That's a no.
Right. Thanks, everyone.